For nearly 2,000 years, one name has been synonymous with treason and betrayal: Judas Iscariot. But what if that story, the one we all know, is not the only story? What if another version existed, buried for centuries, waiting for the right moment to challenge everything we thought we knew? This is not a work of fiction. It is the story of a real manuscript, a lost gospel that emerged from the desert sands of Egypt. In the 1970s, deep within a cave near El Minya, a discovery was made that would eventually shake the foundations of biblical scholarship. A local farmer stumbled upon a leather-bound book, a codex made of papyrus, its pages brittle with age and filled with a strange script. This was the Chakos Codex, and hidden within it was a text long thought to be destroyed forever: the Gospel of Judas. The journey of this ancient book from its dusty tomb to the eyes of the world was a long and perilous one. For years it circulated in the shadowy world of the antiquities black market, its immense value not fully understood. It suffered from neglect and mishandling, at one point famously languishing in a safe deposit box in New York for 16 long years, where the dry air caused the fragile papyrus to crumble and deteriorate. It seemed as though its secrets might turn to dust before they could ever be revealed. The codex was eventually acquired by an antiquities dealer named Frieda Nussberger Chakos, who, recognizing its potential significance, finally sought to have it preserved and understood. This critical step saved it from oblivion and began the difficult process of bringing its message to light. The task of translation was monumental. The text was written in Coptic, an ancient Egyptian language, but it was itself a translation from a much older Greek original, likely composed in the 2nd century. A team of experts led by the renowned Coptic scholar Rodolphe Kasser was assembled by the Maecenas Foundation for Ancient Art in Switzerland. They were faced with a puzzle of more than 1,000 fragments. Painstakingly, they pieced together the shattered pages like detectives reconstructing a forgotten history. Each word deciphered was a step deeper into a version of the Christian story that had been silenced for centuries. Finally, in 2006, in a global event orchestrated by the National Geographic Society, the translated Gospel of Judas was revealed to a stunned and fascinated public. The world was finally able to read the words that early church fathers had condemned as heresy. This was not just another ancient document, it was a direct challenge to the canonical narrative. The text presented itself as a secret account of the teachings Jesus shared with Judas Iscariot in the week leading up to his arrest and crucifixion. It was a gospel that promised to unveil the mysteries of the kingdom and, in doing so, to transform the greatest villain of the New Testament into its most misunderstood hero. The whisper from the sands had become a roar, forcing us to ask profound questions about faith, history, and the truths we hold to be absolute. At the very heart of the Gospel of Judas is a revolutionary and startling claim. It turns the traditional narrative completely on its head. In this version of events, Judas Iscariot is not the greedy, faithless traitor who sold his master for 30 pieces of silver. Instead, he is portrayed as Jesus' most beloved and trusted disciple, the only one who truly grasped the nature of his teacher's divine mission. The Gospel presents Judas as Jesus' closest confidant, a spiritual partner, chosen for the most difficult and crucial task of all. This text suggests that the act we have for so long called a betrayal was, in fact, an act of supreme obedience and profound friendship, orchestrated by Jesus himself. According to this gospel, Jesus knew that his true self, the divine spark within him, could not be liberated as long as he was trapped in a physical body. He needed to shed his mortal form to ascend to the spiritual realm he came from. The other disciples, in their limited understanding, could never comprehend this profound truth. Only Judas had the spiritual insight, the gnosis, to understand that Jesus' physical death was not an end but a necessary transition. Jesus therefore pulls Judas aside and entrusts him with a secret and painful mission to hand him over to the authorities. This was not a betrayal, but a sacred duty that only the strongest disciple could bear. The gospel emphasizes the immense sorrow this task would bring upon Judas. Jesus himself foretells the consequences, telling Judas that he will be cursed by the other generations and reviled throughout history for this act. He will grieve much, knowing the hatred he will endure. Yet in the same breath, Jesus assures him that this sacrifice will elevate him above all the other disciples. You will exceed all of them, Jesus says, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me. This single line encapsulates the core thesis of the gospel. Judas's act was not to destroy Jesus, but to liberate him by sacrificing the man, the physical vessel, that contained his divine spirit. This reimagining of Judas's role changes the entire dynamic of the Passion story. The kiss in the Garden of Gethsemane is no longer an act of deceit but a prearranged signal, a moment of tragic but necessary fulfillment. Judas is not a villain driven by greed, but a tragic hero, a figure who knowingly accepts eternal infamy to fulfill the will of the master he loves and understands. He is the facilitator of salvation, the key that unlocks the door for Jesus' return to the divine kingdom. This gospel asks us to consider whether the greatest act of love could be mistaken, for millennia, as the greatest act of hate. The version of Judas presented in this lost gospel stands in stark opposition to the figure cemented in 2,000 years of Christian tradition, art, and literature. For countless generations, Judas Iscariot has been the ultimate archetype of the traitor. The canonical Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John paint a consistent picture of a man who was overcome by greed, or perhaps even possessed by Satan. In the Gospel of John, he is described as a thief who used to steal from the disciples' money bag. In Luke, it is written that Satan entered into Judas, directly linking his actions to the work of the devil. His name itself has become a synonym for a backstabber, a friend who cannot be trusted. This traditional portrayal has had profound and lasting consequences, not just for theology, but for culture itself. Judas became a symbol of all that was corrupt and evil. His story, a cautionary tale about the dangers of avarice and faithlessness. His fate, as described in the book of Matthew, where he is overcome by remorse and hangs himself, served as a final damning verdict on his character. He was the one who failed the ultimate test, the disciple who stood in the presence of divinity and chose worldly gain instead. This image has been reinforced in countless sermons, paintings, and passion plays, making the idea of a heroic Judas almost unthinkable for most of the Christian world. The Gospel of Judas, therefore, does not simply offer a minor correction to the story, it presents a fundamental challenge to Orthodox belief. If Judas was acting on Jesus' orders, it recasts the entire nature of Jesus' mission and his relationship with his followers. It implies that the other disciples, who went on to found the church, fundamentally misunderstood their master's purpose. They saw the crucifixion as a tragedy and a failure, redeemed only by the resurrection. In contrast, the Gospel of Judas frames the crucifixion as a deliberate and necessary step in a divine plan, a triumph of spirit over flesh that Judas alone was wise enough to facilitate. This radical reinterpretation forces us to question how history is written and whose voices get to be heard. The traditional story of Judas was championed by the early Orthodox Church, which ultimately decided which Gospels would be included in the New Testament and which would be cast out as heresy. The Gospel of Judas represents one of those silenced voices. Its rediscovery is like finding a transcript from the losing side of a major historical argument. It doesn't necessarily mean that this version is true and the other is false, but it proves that in the early days of Christianity, there were multiple competing beliefs about who Jesus was and what his message meant. It reveals a more complex and diverse past than the one we have inherited. To understand the strange and powerful ideas within the Gospel of Judas, we must first understand the world from which it came. This text is a product of Gnosticism, a vibrant and diverse spiritual movement that flourished in the first few centuries of the Christian era. The word Gnostic comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. But this was not ordinary intellectual knowledge. For the Gnostics, gnosis was a secret, intuitive, and personal understanding of the divine. It was a form of direct revelation, a spiritual enlightenment that could free a person's soul from the material world. Gnostics believed that this special knowledge, not blind faith or adherence to rules, was the true path to salvation. Gnostic Christians held a set of beliefs that often put them at odds with the emerging Orthodox Church. One of their core ideas was that the physical world we live in is flawed, a prison for the divine sparks of light that are trapped within human bodies. They did not believe that the benevolent ultimate God, the great invisible spirit mentioned in their texts, created this messy, painful world. Instead, they taught that the material universe was the creation of a lesser, ignorant, and sometimes malevolent deity. This lesser being, often called the demiurge, or, as in the Gospel of Judas, names like Yaldabaoth or Saklas, was mistakenly worshipped as the true God by most of humanity. including, they argued, the followers of mainstream Judaism and Christianity. This worldview explains why the Gospel of Judas portrays Jesus' mission in such a different light. For the Gnostics, Jesus was not a savior who came to redeem humanity from sin in the traditional sense. He was a divine messenger sent from the higher spiritual realm of the true God. His purpose was to awaken people to their true origins, to remind them of the divine spark trapped within them, and to give them the secret gnosis needed to escape the prison of the material world. His teachings were a key to unlock the cage of the flesh and allow the soul to ascend back to its true home, the realm of pure spirit. This is why the Gospel of Judas was so offensive to early church fathers like Bishop Irenaeus of Lyon. Around the year 180, long before the text was lost, Irenaeus wrote a massive work called Against Heresies, in which he specifically condemned the Gospel of Judas. He called it a fictitious history and attacked its Gnostic creators for throwing everything into confusion. For the Orthodox Church, salvation came through faith in Jesus' death and resurrection, administered through the authority of the Church and its bishops. The Gnostic idea that individuals could achieve salvation on their own through secret knowledge threatened this entire structure. The battle between Gnosticism and Orthodoxy was a battle for the very soul of Christianity. The Gospel of Judas presents itself not as a public sermon but as a private revelation. The text explicitly states it is a secret account of the revelation that Jesus spoke in conversation with Judas Iscariot. This conversation, which spans 8 days, unfolds away from the other disciples, establishing Judas's unique and privileged position. Jesus often laughs at the other 11, not out of cruelty, but in response to their profound lack of understanding. He then turns to Judas and says, "Step away from the others, and I shall tell you the mysteries of the kingdom." This act of separation is central to the Gospel's message. The highest truths are not for everyone, but are reserved for the one who is spiritually ready to receive them. In these secret teachings, Jesus reveals to Judas the true nature of reality, a vision far removed from what the other disciples believe. He speaks of Judas's ultimate destiny, telling him that while he will be cursed by the other generations, he will come to rule over them. Jesus also unveils the truth about Judas's place among the disciples. He tells him that he will be replaced in the group of 12, a prophecy fulfilled in the canonical book of Acts when Matthias is chosen. But this is not a punishment. Instead, Jesus elevates Judas to a new, higher status, telling him that he will become the 13th, a position outside and above the limited framework of the others. One of the most profound revelations concerns the identity of the God the other disciples worship. When they offer a prayer of thanksgiving, Jesus scoffs, telling them that it is not the true God they are addressing. He explains, "The God you serve is a lesser power, a subordinate to the greater divine reality." This is a classic Gnostic teaching that the world and many of its religions are under the sway of the ignorant demiurge, not the ultimate transcendent Father. Jesus' secret message to Judas is that he, Judas, belongs to a higher, incorruptible generation and possesses a divine spark from the true God, unlike the other disciples. This secret knowledge is the reason why Judas alone can perform the final, necessary act. Jesus' revelation culminates in the command that will seal Judas's fate in history, but ensure his spiritual triumph. He tells Judas, "You will be greater than all of them, for you will sacrifice the man who bears me." This is the ultimate gnosis, the understanding that the physical Jesus is merely a vessel, a temporary garment for the divine Christ. By handing this physical body over to be destroyed, Judas is not killing his master. He is performing the highest spiritual service, liberating the divine light within. The secret teachings transform the story from one of betrayal to one of profound esoteric understanding. A striking feature of the Gospel of Judas is its relentless and scathing critique of the 11 other disciples. Throughout the text, Jesus is shown as being deeply disappointed with their spiritual immaturity and their complete failure to grasp his true message. He frequently laughs at their prayers, their questions, and their understanding of his mission. This isn't a gentle correction, it's a depiction of a profound disconnect between the teacher and his chosen followers. The Gospel portrays the 12, minus Judas, as well-intentioned but hopelessly lost, trapped in the conventional religious thinking that Jesus came to overthrow. They are followers of the lesser God, not the true invisible Spirit. In one powerful scene, the disciples tell Jesus about a vision they have had. They saw 12 priests standing at an altar, and they were disturbed by the sinful actions they witnessed. The priests were committing a host of wicked deeds, sacrificing their own children, engaging in immoral acts, and invoking Jesus' name shamefully while leading their followers astray. The disciples are horrified by this vision and ask Jesus for its meaning. His answer is a shocking indictment. He looks at them and declares, "You are the ones who are those priests." He directly identifies his own disciples with the corrupt spiritual leaders of their vision. This allegory reveals the Gnostic author's deep criticism of the emerging Orthodox Church, which was founded by these very disciples. From the Gnostic perspective, the Church and its rituals were a continuation of flawed materialistic worship. By establishing a formal priesthood, creating rules, and focusing on a literal interpretation of Jesus' life and death, the disciples were, in the eyes of the Gnostics, leading people astray, just like the priests in their vision. They were using Jesus' name, but they were not serving the true God. They were merely perpetuating the reign of the lesser creator God, the demiurge, and keeping souls trapped in the material world. Jesus explains to the disciples that their devotion is misplaced. He tells them that they are not from the incorruptible generation of the true God as Judas is. Their authority, he implies, is illegitimate because it is not based on genuine spiritual knowledge. Or, this critique serves a crucial purpose within the gospel. It delegitimizes the authority of the mainstream church and its leaders by tracing their origins back to the ignorant disciples. It positions the Gnostic tradition, represented by Judas, as the only true inheritor of Jesus' secret teachings. The other disciples are not just wrong, they are the blind leading the blind. Diving deeper into the Gospel of Judas, we find more than just a revision of the Passion story. The text contains a complex and fascinating section where Jesus reveals to Judas the Gnostic story of creation, or cosmogony. This is a universe that is vastly different from the one described in the book of Genesis. It begins not with a single, all-powerful God creating the world in 6 days, but with a transcendent, unknowable source of all being. Jesus describes this source as a great and invisible spirit, a boundless realm of pure light and consciousness which has no beginning and no end. This is the true, ultimate God who exists far beyond the material cosmos. From this great spirit a luminous cloud of light emerges, and out of this cloud an angelic being called the Self-Begotten is born. This powerful being, also known as the Great Christ, is not the creator of our world but a pure emanation of the ultimate God. The Self-Begotten, in turn, brings forth other divine beings, luminaries, and countless angels, creating a vast and complex spiritual hierarchy in the higher realms, often referred to as the pleroma, or fullness. One of these beings, Adamus, begets an incorruptible generation of souls, the spiritual family to which Jesus and Judas belong. This is a story of divine emanations, a cascade of light from a perfect source. The creation of the flawed material world comes much later and is portrayed as something of a cosmic accident or rebellion. The text describes how two subordinate angels, Nebro and Sacklus, are created. Nebro is also called Yaldabaoth, a name that Gnostic texts frequently give to the demiurge, the lesser creator god. These beings and the angels they create are tasked with ruling over chaos and the underworld. It is Sacklus who, with his angels, decides to fashion a human being. They create Adam and Eve, but the physical bodies they make are crude prisons for the spiritual essence, the divine spark that is breathed into them. This creation story fundamentally changes the nature of humanity's problem. In the Gnostic view, the problem is not sin in the moral sense, but ignorance of our true divine origins. We are divine spirits from the realm of the invisible spirit, trapped in bodies of flesh created by a lower, ignorant power. Salvation, therefore, is not about being forgiven for sin, but about being awakened to this truth. It is the process of acquiring thee that allows the spirit to remember its home and find its way back after death, navigating past the hostile powers or archons that guard the material realms and try to keep souls imprisoned. This cosmic map revealed to Judas is the secret key to liberation. As Jesus' revelations draw to a close, Judas shares a vision of his own, one that foretells his own grim fate in the eyes of the world. In his vision, Judas sees the other 12 disciples stoning him and persecuting him with great anger. This prefigures the historical reality that would follow, the condemnation of Judas by the burgeoning Christian movement and his transformation into a figure of pure evil. This vision stands in stark contrast to the canonical account in the Gospel of Matthew where Judas, filled with remorse, takes his own life. Here, Judas does not die by his own hand. He is a martyr, rejected and attacked by those who do not understand his true purpose. Following this vision of his persecution, Judas sees something else, something magnificent. He sees a great house in a heavenly realm, a place of immense spiritual glory. He asks Jesus if his own spirit can enter this holy place. Jesus' reply is both clarifying and poignant. He tells Judas that no person born of a mortal womb is worthy to enter that house, for it is reserved for the holy, for those who belong to the divine realm. However, Jesus then gives Judas a crucial piece of information about his own destiny, telling him, "You will grieve much when you see the kingdom and all its generation." This suggests that while Judas belongs to that holy generation, his path there will be filled with sorrow. It is at this point that Jesus gives Judas a mysterious and powerful title. After hearing Judas's vision, Jesus tells him, "You will become the 13th demon." This sounds terrifying and evil to a modern ear, but the original meaning of the word is likely very different. The Coptic word used here was probably a translation of the Greek term. In ancient Greek thought, A was not necessarily an evil entity like our modern demon. It was a spirit, a lesser deity, or a guiding intelligence that existed between the human and divine realms. By calling Judas the 13th demon, Jesus is elevating him to a unique spiritual status, setting him apart from and above the 12. Judas's role as the 13th is therefore one of honor, not shame. The 12 disciples represent the zodiac, the rulers of the flawed material cosmos created by the lesser god. They are trapped within that system. Judas, as the 13th, transcends it. He is the odd one out, the one who breaks the pattern and operates on a higher spiritual plane. He is the spirit who has to see beyond the material world and assist Jesus in escaping it. His destiny is to be misunderstood and cursed by the generations ruled by the 12, but to ultimately hold a special, transcendent place in the cosmic order. The rediscovery and translation of the Gospel of Judas is more than just an academic curiosity. It is a profound reminder of the diversity and complexity of early Christian thought. It does not necessarily disprove the canonical Gospels or prove that Judas was a hero. Instead, it opens a window into a forgotten past, revealing that the story of Jesus and his followers was once told in many different ways. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, there was no single, unified Christianity. There were multiple communities with competing visions of who Jesus was, what his message meant, and how salvation was achieved. This gospel is a surviving testament to one of those powerful alternative voices. The text forces us to reconsider the very nature of historical truth. History is often written by the victors, and in the case of early Christianity, the Orthodox movement guided by the apostles' successors was the victor. They selected the texts that would form the New Testament and condemned all others, like the Gospel of Judas, as heresy. For centuries, we only knew about these heretical texts through the writings of their staunchest opponents, like Bishop Irenaeus. Now, we can hear the other side of the argument in its own words. It challenges us to think critically about how narratives are formed and how certain beliefs come to be accepted as absolute truth, while others are silenced and erased. The Gospel of Judas also offers a powerful lesson in religious tolerance and the human search for meaning. The Gnostic vision it presents, of a flawed material world, a remote and perfect God, and the divine spark within us, was a sophisticated attempt to grapple with some of life's most difficult questions. Why is there suffering and evil in a world created by a good God? What is our true purpose? The Gnostics answered these questions with a rich and imaginative mythology that prioritized personal, spiritual experience over institutional authority. While their answers may seem strange to us today, they represent a deeply human quest for knowledge and liberation. Ultimately, the Gospel of Judas enriches our understanding of our own history. It demonstrates that faith is not a monolith. It is a dynamic, evolving conversation with many different points of view. By studying texts like this, we are not undermining faith, we are gaining a more complete and nuanced picture of its origins. We learn that questioning, reinterpreting, and seeking deeper meaning has always been part of the human spiritual journey. The story of Judas, the supposed ultimate traitor, now becomes a story about how one group's hero can become another's villain, reminding us that the line between the two is sometimes drawn only by those who get to tell the tale.